Good day to you. My name is Andrew Baxter, and I'm here to report on Dark Tides, the Great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919 by Stephen Puello. As World War I was ramping up, Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of U.S. Industrial Alcohol, built a very large steel holding tank that dominated the Boston harbor skyline. The storage tank was rushed into production and minimal engineering calculations were done. Curved steel plates were riveted together, and because of the rush to completion, the only testing that was done was to fill the tank about 6 to 8 inches with water to ensure that it didn't leak at the foundation. It was typically filled to about 60% capacity with molasses, and from the outset it leaked so much that the tank was painted brown to hide that leaking molasses and the stains that it caused. Caulking of the seams between the steel plates became a regular maintenance occurrence, and there were reports of children visiting the tank after school to get a little molasses treat by swiping their fingers along the joints and the rivets. So what was happening at the time in Boston, the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company was producing alcohol from molasses to first support explosive manufacturing during World War I. And after the war ended, they shifted to general alcohol production. And they were also producing inexpensive liquor as fast as possible before the prohibition ban went into effect. And to meet this oncoming demand as Americans started to stock up for the prohibition, they also stocked up in raw material. So orders were ramped up as well as production. And on January 14th, the day before the tank exploded, a shipload of molasses was added to the tank, which was about half full at the time. And that led to the tank actually being approximately 95% full. And this was likely the most full that the tank had ever been loaded. And so then it happened. At about 12:30 on January 15th, 1919, the tank burst and flooded the area with approximately 2.3 million gallons of molasses. As you can see from the GIF below, the area covered by the flood was significant. The devastation was immediate. Due to the density of the molasses, the flood caused more destruction than would typically be seen with liquids such as water. Buildings were completely knocked down. The steel elevated rail line right next to the tank nearby was twisted and damaged. 21 people were killed. Over 150 were seriously injured. And to top it all off, rescue efforts were hampered by the inability to move effectively through the sticky molasses. The news spread fast, but the cleanup of the molasses did not. Didn't go quite as fast. The cleanup took weeks. Fireboats were used to wash down the area and drain the molasses into the harbor. Workers used brooms and shovels to push the sticky water molasses mixture into the drains and right into the harbor. And brown runoff water was seen in the harbor and tainting the water a dark brown color right in through the summer. And again, this happened in January. So what happened? What's the aftermath and the lessons learned? The company who owned the tank, U.S. Industrial Alcohol, claimed that it was blown up initially by anarchists, and they denied any wrongdoing. Eventually, the case was brought to trial, and interestingly enough, it was actually one of the first ever class action lawsuits. After 3 years and the use of an independent court-appointed auditor to investigate all the facts, the U.S. Industrial Alcohol Company was found liable and was required to pay over $600,000 in damages and approximately $7,000 to each victim's family. Many laws and regulations governing construction were changed as a direct result of the disaster, including requirements for oversight by a licensed architect and a civil engineer, and the creation of government-led building inspection programs to ensure that buildings were designed and built safely. And if you visit the area today, you'll find a city sports complex and a small green historical marker telling the story of the disaster. So what did I think of the book, Dark Tides? Well, it was extremely readable. It was just like a page turner. It's a fairly short book as well, but it had an excellent recounting of events, and there were some really fun little like details. It was well researched. A few cons. It felt like at times the author took some liberties regarding maybe some what people were actually thinking or feeling. There were some ideas that maybe the author gave his opinion instead of it actually being fact-based. And there was also sometimes a tendency to be a little repetitive. But all in all, this was a really fabulous book, an excellent recounting, and I really had a great time with it. Thank you for allowing me to tell you about Dark Tides, the great Boston Molasses Flood of 1919.